Yeah, well, you used the operative word, which is how. It's not like it's important to understand the numbers or the costs, but it's how are they generated? And I use that approach a lot with my teams in due diligence. It's like you can ask all the due diligence questions you want, but what my experience, what the real key questions are about, I understand you responded to the question, but how does that work? You can ask a question, what do you sell? And they'll respond, we sell this, and that. It's like, how do you sell it? That's where the real magic happens. And that's where you have to listen, like, do they really know how they sell? Do they really know how they develop? Do they really know how they manage people? So the how and the why is almost as important, more important than the what.
Welcome to M&A Science Live, where leading M&A practitioners share lessons learned from their experience. If you're interested in keeping up with the latest from M&A Science, visit mascience.com and subscribe to our free newsletter. Every Monday, we share highlights from our interviews and publications so you can continuously improve your M&A skills for free. Again, that's mascience.com. Today, I'm here with Jim Buckley, Vice President, Mergers, Acquisitions, Integration at VMware. Those of you not familiar with VMware, it's a NASDAQ-traded company with a $60 billion market cap that specializes in cloud computing and virtualization technology. Today, we're going to talk about how to succeed in M&A integration and measure that success. How are you doing today, Jim?
Good. How you doing, Kison?
Pretty good. Honored and happy to be here with you. Maybe we can kick things off with a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for inviting me. This is a great opportunity. I appreciate it. And I'm not used to doing this. I'm the guy that likes to go in and hide and do work. Not a guy that's
Well, don't thank me too much. I'm going to give you a hard time on this interview. So when we're done, then you can decide.
Hey, yeah. So background. My first real job was Sun Microsystems back in the 80s. I was employee number 190 there, and I was an ops guy. I ran their stockroom, shipping and receiving. I had a pretty general business degree from Santa Clara University, so I couldn't write code, but I could figured I could manage parts and people that knew how to deal with parts back in the days when we had components and things in the US and built stuff. That actually led to a job in cost accounting of all things. And I was a horrible cost accounting student, managerial accounting in school. Somehow the guy said, well, somebody that knows how to handle stuff and can apply some math to it, yeah, that's a good job. That led to an FP&A job. So I was at Sun 9 years, bounced around the valley, worked at Silicon Graphics, worked at a company called Radius. All those were finance jobs, except at Silicon Graphics, I managed a production control floor. We built the enterprise servers there back when they were trying to figure out how to take video technology and convert it into enterprise data pipes. And then, I ended up at a company called Mentor Graphics that recently got acquired by Siemens a couple of years ago. And I was the division controller for their PCB design group. And we started doing M&A, and the company wasn't big enough to have anybody that really knew much about M&A, no corp dev team. And so I got voluntold to negotiate a few deals, do the due diligence, and then figure out what to do with it afterwards. My boss at the time, Henry Potts, had a lot of faith in me, a lot more faith in me than I did. And one of my key learnings out of that opportunity was our first deal, and he had to leave to go on another business trip. And he said, you need to stay here and kind of run this thing for a while, be my eyes and ears. And I'm a finance guy. Like, I built the valuation model. I don't know what these guys even do really. And his words of wisdom that I still remember this day, and I won't use the word, but he said, just don't F it up. And I was like, it's like, all right, I don't know where that bar is set, but I'll make sure I don't do that. And I learned real time. I had nobody, I had no real mentor in M&A. I learned, I'll say is the hard way, but it wasn't really that hard because it's problem solving. That's really what M&A integration is. A lot of it is about. So I was a mentor, got some deals under my belt. Microsoft found me, recruited me up to Redmond, where we did in the 5 years I was there, we did 90 deals. We were busy, very acquisitive, big deals, little deals, everything in between, and global as well. And from there, I got recruited to VMware to set up their M&A integration practice in 2010. Did that for 5 years and got recruited away to PayPal to set up their integration practice post spin from eBay. And then VMware did two large concurrent public deals a couple of years ago, and they called me up and said, "Please come back." And so I came back and ran those, and now I run the entire practice again.
So a lot of different types of deals, size deals. What's interesting is your background because you came from this financial analyst, FP&A, and you touched some ops sort of project management and then get over to integration. In your experience, how does your background help you with your current role?
Well, I think the consistent thread is really everything that I've done is has a thread of problem solving in it, whether it's operational, financial, or integration. So that's consistent, but that's not terminally unique to just my background. I think a lot of you give a problem to a software developer and say solve this by typing ones and zeros. It's similar, but it's problem solving. Excuse me. For me specifically, what I learned was what I did in financial planning and analysis really helped me become who and what I am in M&A integration. And what that really means is there's two functions in a company, assuming they have an M&A integration function. FP&A consolidates everything that happens across the company, both top line, bottom line, and then the math comes out to a net income number. But it's the one place where you touch every function, you touch every cost center, you touch every SKU, the top line, the bottom line. And what we do in M&A integration is very, very similar to that. We touch every function, we figure out, do we integrate it? Do we not integrate it? Does it fit? Does it not fit? If it doesn't fit, do we want it to fit? How do we make it fit? Do we use a hammer? Or do we use duct tape? Anything in between? And so my experience is, very biased, but I think that FP&A background really lent itself well to my to my career, which has been the last 20 plus years just in M&A.
Is it because you understand how the organization's spending money or how these functions are spending money and then be able to kind of roll that up as you look at how you integrate a company?
Yeah, well, you used the operative word, which is how. It's not like it's important to understand the numbers or the costs, but it's how are they generated? And I use that approach a lot with my teams in due diligence. It's like you can ask all the due diligence questions you want, but what, in my experience, what the real key questions are about, I understand you responded to the question, but how does that work? You can ask a question, what do you sell? And they'll respond, we sell this, and that. It's like, how do you sell it? That's where the real magic happens. And that's where you have to listen, like, do they really know how they sell? Do they really know how they develop? Do they really know how they manage people? So the how and the why is almost more important than the what.
That makes sense. Can you walk me through that and just, I want to understand the lens a little better because I'm trying to imagine being that person that understands. It's almost like you're doing it backwards. You sort of understand the financials and then start thinking about the how. Would you correlate like bigger line items with bigger things that are happening? I see a big line item for ERP software that we're paying for, and then start correlating that with what's going on behind that and start driving towards that how? Like, what does the thinking actually look like when?
Well, the how really is the precursor to developing the end state and then working backwards. So again, you're thinking about it the right way. At least my approach is, where do we want this thing to end up? Like, are we combining assets? Are we combining some assets? Are we ditching some assets? But what is the end state? Or, the North Star is used a lot, but that got kind of old, at least for me. So I started calling it the end state because just to mix things up. Once we understand what the agreed upon end state is, that is really driving the value for the deal, then you start working through the gates coming back to the beginning. And
Yep.
so in that process, you start to look at things like how did they, okay, SaaS and subscription is a great example of figuring out the how, because everybody does it different. There's no one size fits all. For VMware, we're on that transformational journey right now from um, ELA on-prem software, big, go out and generate a $10 million license and you're done, versus sell them a recurring revenue stream based on usage, and it just grows over and then grow it over time. So the how starts to come into that dialogue when you're like, okay, so how do you generate revenue? Well, we sell subscription software. Okay. How do you set up that subscription? Like you can keep double clicking like on a Google search until you get to the end, or till you get to the level of depth that gives you enough to move forward to start building your plan. And the thing about like SaaS and subscription is it's all about the product. It's all about the sales motion. It's about the support motion. It's about the revenue generation. Like there's so much encapsulated in that it becomes better to go slow to make sure you don't miss anything, because it's basically math, right? It builds upon itself. And then you start to say, okay, we've got a model that says generate this much revenue. How do we get to that number? Show me the math that gets to that number. And then it's, what are the costs associated with getting to that number? And because again, back to the FP&A comment, Kison, is that I look at everything through the P&L. Not everybody does that. I just do because I'm an old finance guy that wasn't really good enough at finance to keep doing it for a career, become a CFO. So I became an M&A guy. Um, and, when I look at things through a P&L, I can start to look at certain cells in an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, that revenue number in that quarter is built on, and then understand what are the major drivers for it, what are the major, and how are those driven, and then all the cost elements for every function, and then head count, and so it builds upon itself. But it's the big ones are easy, but it's the little ones over time. The 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 over time that actually is additive and bigger than that big nut, like around an SFTC license or something.
I think that the theme of this interview is start with the end state. That work your way backwards and understand how you're going to achieve it. Thinking of that.
Have you heard the analogy of like, and nobody's ever going to confuse me with Galileo, that's for sure, Magellan, but like when you're navigating, if you start at a point and if you proceed just 1 degree off from that point, and over time you become further and further and further away from your desired end state.
Yep.
So if you don't start with the end state and work backwards, your navigation is going to be all wrong. You could be targeting to get in Boston and end up in, Des Moines. Not your desired end state.
So I think there is a variable definition of what end state means to people in the context of M&A, especially because people may talk about an end state and it's just very, very high level. We want to combine these product lines so we can cross sell. I don't know. And that's kind of where it's left off. And you're kind of handed that down as this is the end state. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about that. Like how much do you actually crystallize it, and how do you communicate that across the participants that are going to be involved?
Yeah. I think it takes some time to develop the confidence to be able to, because usually that dialogue is with somebody pretty senior, somebody like your CFO or the CEO or an SVP of a product line or a business unit. And they give you this sort of smarmy kind of like, we just want it to be really successful. We want the customers to be happy and all the employees to be happy. And yeah, we're going to spend $5 billion. So just make that work. Yeah, no, that's not enough to go on. So, it's some of it, it's a little easier for me because I've been doing this for a long time to like lean in and go, no, I need more than that. And here's what I mean by more. Okay, so we're going to acquire these product lines. They currently generate X revenue. They're currently supported by X employees, basically taking their business model and teasing it apart. And then the execs go like, what do you want to do with these guys? Like they're at $2 million a year in revenue. Our valuation model says 5 million. So there's got to be some sort of synergy to get you from 2 to 5. What are you thinking about that? And most have an answer, but you got to kind of hang in there because they haven't necessarily thought all that through. Like, I don't know what everybody else's experience is with corp dev teams and finance people, but you got to be able to kind of press them on their assumptions, because people love to spend the shareholders' money if it's a public company. It's easy. Like, I have yet to meet an exec that doesn't love to do M&A. They just do. It's like, we're going to go buy this thing and then bring the little, red ribbon wrap package, put it on my desk, and then go do whatever you do. It's like, no, that's not how this works. We're going to unwrap that package and we're going to figure out what we really got. And then we're going to go hit your numbers, whatever the synergies are. And, I'm not a big fan of the word synergies because I think it's one of those overused terms. It's like, what are the goals? What are we really looking to get? How do you get from 2 million to 5 million? I'll help you get there, but you got to pave some of the road here. I'm not doing all this.
So I like the part that makes sense is validating your assumptions as part of defining that end state, because you got a financial model behind driving the deal for how we're going to financially do the deal. Within that are a lot of assumptions around synergy / goals, and being able to define that, work through that, and help that build into the end state as well, so that there's more pillars or substance in there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing when people are building models, and I've worked with some incredible corp dev teams, like and people that are really willing to partner well, but sometimes that's not always the case, right? Sometimes never the twain shall meet. Corp dev builds a model, drives a deal, and then throws it over the wall. The integration team catches it, and like, what is this? But I do think working closely with those people that are building the components to build the model, because frequently what you'll get is, I'm sure a lot of people have had this experience where you'll get a revenue number that doesn't have a lot of data behind it, but it supports the valuation. And I'm at a point again where I'll sit in there at a meeting with very senior, like I did this a few times at Microsoft and almost got walked out of the job and the building because I was pushing a little too hard. But I'm like, that number makes no sense. Like, how do you, well, it supports the valuation. So you're solving for the valuation and I got to solve for the business results. That does not sound right.
Isn't that what works in a public company? You just round numbers up and, hey, being public, economics work in your favor as long as market cap keeps growing.
I don't think that worked very well for Enron, but something along those lines. We'll just keep rounding the numbers up until they're right or not.
Hey, to get the deal done.
Well, that's kind of what it's like. This is what it's going to take to get the deal done. And that's why I think it's really important that at least, if not the integration lead, maybe like in my role as the leader of the integration practice, like get really early purview and insight into the deal, because I can ask those questions. And like, what place did you pull that number out of? Because there's nothing of substance here.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about when integration should get involved. And this has been interesting. I've been doing these podcasts for about 5 years now. And I remember early beginnings, it was so common to hear that thrown over the wall in this terms of, I usually get a 2 weeks heads up when a deal is coming our way. These things, but we've seen a shift primarily in the last 2-3 years where now there's this clear emphasis on integration, the importance of it. Are we going to make value during integration or destroy value? Let's really think about that ahead of time and plan for it. How have you seen that evolve, and where do you think how it should ideally play out?
So it has evolved in the last few years. And again, I think, in my start in M&A, I sort of owned the whole thing because I was the division controller. So I was the numbers guy. I built the model. So I was accountable for my own model. Like, whatever I made up, I paid for downstream, and so, but that doesn't happen nowadays, right? I mean, that was back in the late 1990s, 1999, actually, when I started this process journey. but it has evolved. Like the partnership between corp dev and integration and the business units at Microsoft when I worked there, 2005 to 2010. Microsoft was Microsoft back then. It's different than it is today with Satya leading it. It was back when, Steve Ballmer was running it and, running down the hall and yelling at people and asking us why we F this up and F that up. And, we're like, yes, sir. And then he would take us to math camp and I'll explain how this model should work. And we'd sit in his office, his conference room off his office. He'd go through the deck to get the deal approved, get his approval before the board. And he'd go, I'll show you how to model this. And you get up on the whiteboard and start scribbling a bunch of stuff. And corp dev guys are just sitting there going, eyes wide open. We're laughing at the corp dev guys, the integration guys are. And then we're just looking at Ballmer going, I think he's right. We'll come back with a revised model. But the partnership there was really, really good. And that was about where I really started to learn about corp dev's primary goal. I mean, in a very, in a different world, they should be as responsible for the outcome and the results over time as anybody. But what I've learned is the reality is their charter is to acquire value. The integration team's job is to create value. And that's why I look for people on my teams that have really varied backgrounds, because value can be ascribed a bunch of different ways. It's not just a currency, right? Are the people happy? Is the technology quality? Did we get a good team writing code? If we're bringing over any of the back office people, are they going to be really additive to the business? Are they going to succeed in a bigger company coming from a smaller company? The hardest part is really the go-to-market side. Like, is their field going to be able to do what we do the way we do it? Or heaven forbid, we should actually have eyes wide open and say, maybe they do it better than we do, and maybe we should try their way. But I think that's where the integration team, again, having this broad fabric view, matrixed view of how the company works, is really how you create value, because it's not about, my experience anyways, it's as much about turning the big dials as it is about turning the little dials, as we were talking about earlier. Is it the big thing you're looking for, or the little thing you're looking for? It's like, the answer is yes, because there's a lot more of the little things that add up over time to become a big thing in aggregate.
So we got a couple things. We got having a good partnership with corp dev. I want to get back to when you mentioned finding opportunities, when you need to stop and say we need to change ourselves and actually learn from them. But the other one you mentioned was essentially understanding the company. The more you understand the company, the better you're going to be able to integrate it.
Well, and the comment there is it's bigger than that, and I'll explain. And I've actually asked this question of my team in the last couple of weeks. I said, who does due diligence on the acquirer? Like, does the team doing the work actually understand how our company works? Like, VMware is a very complicated company. It's very, very, very cross-matrix. The technology's complicated. The selling motion is complicated. We've got, like many companies, we've got business units du jour kind of thing. One day there's 15, the next day there's 23, and then it's back to 10. And, it's like every big enterprise software company. But I'm sort of big nowadays, like, before you start poking at the target, make sure you understand how we do things, because your job is to fit them, tab A into slot B. Because if you don't understand our side of it, then how do you know how to integrate them? How do you know where to plug their stuff into our stuff?
How do you approach that? That's a good thought. It hasn't come up where they need to have diligence on your organization. The target should, and that would probably help them open up things, expectations, understanding of how things are going to go down.
Well, a lot of it is, having them, just like yesterday, there was a big presentation by one of our VPs of IT that's actually been at VMware a long time. And he actually presented the product portfolio view from an IT perspective. And I had all my team sit through it. It was dry, it was boring, it was dull, but it was informative. Like, because at the end of the day, that's why nobody wants to do it, because they're like, that's boring. I like the M&A part, the real sexy part. That's the fun part. Like, you know what, you will massively screw it up if you don't know what you're plugging in them into. And so there's a lot of learnings, opportunities, classes that can be taken around product and the overall company. But I also think some of it just comes with time. You incur enough scars in certain areas and you learn like, I kind of do need to understand how this works. And another example, Kison, is Microsoft, when I was there, for as big as it was, and it was 90,000 employees and some, I don't know, 30, 40,000 contractors, tens and, they had business units bigger than most Fortune 100 companies. But it was not hard to work at. It was really pretty easy to understand how Microsoft worked. And I think that was driven out of the gate early on from Bill and Steve. Like, it's like, look, we're going to be big, so let's not make it hard. It's hard enough, big matters. There's a certain challenge to just the depth and the breadth. But it was one of the easiest companies I've ever worked at because it was just big building blocks. It was big Lego pieces that all operated very similarly. So when we'd go from business unit deal to business unit deal, you didn't have to do a lot more homework to understand how they work. You'd have to do technology homework. You didn't have to do a lot to drill into how they worked.
Can you walk me through an example of, you can make up a deal, right? When you're acquiring a company, it'd actually be interesting to even think about the beginning of where you get involved and start understanding it from the integration perspective. But then that point example or concept of that company being able to do diligence on your organization to understand it. I'd like to get an example of that just to crystallize a little bit, because I think it's something unique that I don't hear anybody else talk about it.
Well, so I think, even I'll be self-indicting with this comment, but I think it takes a certain type of personality to be brave enough to insert themselves as far left in the process as possible. I did it at Microsoft as a director level, which was, wasn't VP, but it wasn't, I wasn't a software developer one. I was sort of in the middle from a hierarchical perspective. But I was just annoying. I'd find out about meetings that I wasn't invited to and just show up and say, what, kick me out, disinvite me. I don't care. Like, what do you think? I don't care. Like, I think that's one thing that happens over time is you care less about what people think about why you're there. Like, I don't care. And, kick me out. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'm not going to sit here and throw my pencil against the whiteboard and throw a fit. But, I think I need to be here and here's why. And the why is, the conversation early on is really, really important. It's not about things that go in the deck. It's about the dialogue around the things that are going in the deck. And the things that go in the deck really, really early on around, the pre-LOI kind of phase before you get the letter of intent drafted and sent over is like, okay, why are these guys really important? What problem does this company solve for us? And it gets back to, the what's important, but okay, but how do they do all those what's? Like, what's their secret sauce? Like, are they really good at branding a big pile of code that isn't really worth much? We're just going to put it all in goodwill anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So if you can get involved early on in the process, and it doesn't mean you got to be there with the initial conversations, but pretty close to those initial conversations is really, really helpful.
Earlier the better.
Go ahead.
Earlier the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just that simple, and again, I'm not going to tell people like, don't worry about being invited, just show up. But, at a certain point in my career, I was much more comfortable. Like, here I am, deal with it. Okay. It also helps if you have a really long, white, old beard.
I was going to say the beard, it just allows you to do that.
People don't want to throw Gandalf out of the meeting.
Guys with beards don't give a shit what you think. They're going to do there, and you need to hear them out.
Like, you just sit there and kind of like, you have a question? Are you trying to make a point? Really? No, come on, let's have this conversation. But deals evolve over time, right? I mean, there's this initial opportunity to solve a problem, which is what most acquisitions are. It's like, we want more revenue, we want more product, we want awesome code writers. They got a great architect. They got, they got a lot great customer base. They sell into customers. We don't sell, whatever all those little dials are, and that build the model and build the solution. That is when you start to really synthesize what that early integration view is going to be like. Like, how am I going to create value out of this thing? Like they're talking all these different Play-Doh and Lego pieces. How am I, the integration lead and team, going to take that? Say, okay, I understand what your vision is. Now it's probably not dissimilar to an architect drafting a blueprint that a GC and a bunch of subcontractors have to say, what was that guy thinking? Like, that's not going to work. But here's what this is a better view of it. Right? It's not really, honestly, it's not that dissimilar than building a house or a commercial building, right? You sit there and some architects sitting there going, okay, well, I'm going to build an 85-story building in the middle of Chicago. There's a big lot we can go, dig a big deep hole in. And then you've got 85 stories that are all kind of rinse and repeat all the way up, but it's not always rinse and repeat. And you got an elevator here, and you got wiring up the wazoo, and you got pipes and conduit. And oh my God, this guy's, this view's great, that view stinks. And you take all those, and that's the dialogue. That's the dialogue that's really interesting and important, I think, for integration teams to hear, is like, because that doesn't go in the deck for approval for an LOI. But you've heard it, now how to back into what that conversation was based on what's in the deck, and that's what you can carry forward.
Have the contractor look at the blueprint before you sign. I like it.
Yeah, well, yeah. The other thing too is like, we were talking about houses and things before, and you look at those as a home buyer. You have new developments, you look at the different elevations they show you. Like, this house has a pitched roof, this one has 3 gables, this one has 2 fireplaces, chimneys. And you look at that, you're like, wow, that looks awesome. But that's like it's like an artist rendering. Like, it's so far probably from reality. Like what's behind the watercolor or the ink, right? And that's where if you keep double clicking on it and then make it real, it's tangible. Then you can do things with it. It's like, well, what if you took this room and moved it here? And I don't want the sliding door there. I want French doors. I want it to be all hardwood, not carpet. And then you start double clicking, and it's not, again, dissimilar to integration. It's like, I know you want to do that, but it doesn't add any value. Why would we do that? And it's going to cost. There's a cost with it.
So, and that's benefit of getting involved early, is putting those kind of considerations up front, having that time to look at those different scenarios and options and make those decisions. Can we get to that part about the target company when they start doing diligence on your organization? I want to piecemeal that to when it fits in. We're in the timeline,
Yeah.
Are you sitting in that room on the left side to hear how you engage it?
Well, it is interesting. I get, because not everybody does it. A lot of target companies, if it's a large business, a large public company acquiring a small startup, they don't, depending on what value the startup is bringing to the large company. There's sort of some, and I've been in those conversations. Like, do you guys have any concerns? Like, Microsoft, again, is a great example. Microsoft was the Borg that was just going to consume everybody, right? And that's what all these companies thought. It's like, I'm going to lose my brand, I'm going to lose, our mojo, but my bank account and E-Trade account's going to look really good. So it's like, what do I want to do here? How hard do I want to press on this stuff? And there was one company we looked at, it was a deal that I worked on in Madison, Wisconsin, and the CEO was convinced that he should report to Steve Ballmer. And these are really early in the conversations, right? We were going back and we hadn't even entered, it was still preliminary due diligence. So I was able to get in that early, not pre-confirmatory due diligence, pre-LOI. And this guy's like, I think this will be a really good match. I think we'll bring a lot of value to Microsoft. He goes, but I'm a little concerned about how we're going to fit in as an organization. He goes, I think I should report to Steve Ballmer, and we should be like this little incubator for him. And it's like, the inside voice is like, don't make a face, don't make a face, don't make a face, don't roll your eyes, don't make a face. And so we just kind of let it hang out there. It was just the corp dev guy and I. And then we laughed and then we had dinner and we were talking about, what'd you think about that comment? We're both like NFW. Like, no, no, like you might be 5 levels down, 6 levels, maybe 7. I don't know. Like, dude, you're just not that important. Um,
Yeah.
but you can't say that. You don't want to, because it's all about relationships, right? That's really a key cornerstone for M&A is those relationships. So over time, once the deal got real and at Microsoft, the integration team led confirmatory due diligence, which is a little unique. Usually it's corp dev that leads it, but at Microsoft, the integration lead would lead the confirmatory. And so I got to build a relationship with this guy, and he goes, you guys have never answered my question about reporting structure. And I just looked at him. I said, you're right. And just to be really clear, it's never been up for debate. You're not going to report to Steve Ballmer. Did you ask Steve? No, I didn't, but I know the answer. You're not going to report to Steve Ballmer. Well, I don't know if I want to do this deal then. I'm like, okay, let's have the parent-child relationship kind of discussion here. Dude, you're going to make some pretty good coin out of this deal. Does it really matter? And you're going to work for 2 years. You'll vest all your stock. And then you're going to go, you're a serial entrepreneur. I know how you guys think, right? You think you're going to hang longer than 2 years? Probably not. You think you're going to make a lot of money out of this deal? Probably. Does it really matter if you report to Steve Ballmer or not? But it would look so good on my CV. It's like, it's not going to happen. So if that's going to blow up the deal, that's going to blow up the deal. Good luck explaining that to your investors. That's where you got to play that card at the right time because you don't want to break the relationship. But it's also, I think another thing that's coming out of this, Kison, is really the integration leads need to be trusted advisors on both sides of the equation. Like I work really hard to get the target company to trust me. Like you guys have to trust me because I can help you make this deal really, really good for you. But I'm also Switzerland. I'm not here to cram a bunch of Kool-Aid down your throat from corporate. That's not what I do. My job is very pure and simple. Do the right thing, make the right thing happen. That's it. And sometimes, corporate's not going to like what I say, but they can't argue it because it is the right thing. So I kind of take this Switzerland role right down the middle. My E-Trade account doesn't change whether we do the deal or not. I've had that discussion too. It's like, dude, you're going to make $50 million out of this deal. And I might get another $1,000 my bonus. Like, so I'm just here to do the right thing. I'm here to do the right deal. So you get 50, I get 1,000. Everybody's happy. I could be happier, but that's a different discussion.
What I want another example. How do you introduce this reverse diligence idea? I'm still stuck on because I'm imagining our marketing team listening to this that we could write a play because we have this whole public library of plays on mascience.com/plays. The idea is open source M&A as much as possible by creating these short form. It's actually modeled off of Atlassian does. Atlassian has team plays. So it's all these project management techniques and it's all step-by-step how to do it. So if you run out of ideas or just frustrated with people not getting shit done, you can reach in a bucket of plays and try things or just build your approach around it and saying, hey, instead of following checklists, we have these plays we follow. So that was the whole idea.
Yep.
But this would be an interesting one. We did an interview earlier in the year with Jerry Will about how they use red team exercises to knock off the biases on deals. But I like the idea of doing this reverse diligence. And I want to get a little bit into like what would be the step-by-step to explain to somebody, how do you do that? How do you, prep the team? Who would be involved? Like, do you set up a formal meeting and explicitly trying to convey what the company, like you mentioned with the Microsoft example, this is what our org structure looks like. This is kind of where, what are the key things that they would want to learn, or how would you deliver that to get that kind of effect and I guess what are the results out of it? Are they coming in with a better attitude? Are you more synced up? Is there less resistance
Well, I think, I don't know that I do know. I have not gotten to the point with a target where I said, you really need to ask questions of us as well. I've never been that proactive because it's up to them. But I will suggest around the fringes, like, look, this goes a lot better the more you know about us as well. Like if I was sitting in your seat, it might not be one-to-one. We ask a question, you ask the same question kind of thing. But there's at least 10 questions you want to ask us. And actually, I have had that dialogue, and I got sort of the pretty bird kind of look, like, what is he talking about? It's like, don't you want to know, like, how is your technology going to be used?
Yeah.
And again, like, I don't think it's a surprise, but that the dollar sign is floating around every conversation, right? This is a $5 million deal, it's $100 million deal, it's $1 billion deal, right? And people are getting compensated for their hard work to build a business that gets acquired, right? So, but it can be a bad deal for the target just as much as it can be a bad deal for the acquirer, right? Where it's just not a match. Like, you're going to destroy everything you've built. And that there's no incentive on the acquiring side for that to happen. So I'm actually more prone to be really hyped on a deal when their CEO, their president, their senior execs are like, well, how is this going to work? How are we going to fit into your business? Or even, the dumb question that is absolutely not dumb is like, why do you want to buy us? Like, that's a really hard question to answer. And it goes back to earlier in the conversation, Kison, where it's like the integration lead talking to the acquiring exec, like, okay, so you got all the fluffy purple, green, pink stuff out there, but like, what does that mean? What are you really looking to get from this target? That conversation should be bilateral, both directions.
Yeah. You got a little book to write out of this, like integration prep right here, or a handbook, because there's a lot to go into that. I think that's part of the process nobody talks about. I don't hear anybody talk about it in a lot of these interviews. But it seems like that would be the enablement. We talk about post, PMI success and how do we make these deals actually work.
Well, like, if you think about a sales exec that's in the conversation earlier, it's like, how are you guys going to sell my stuff?
Yeah.
Well, there's a $10 million revenue associated with it, so we'll figure it out. It's like, no, that doesn't work. How are you going to sell my stuff? Are my guys going to sell my stuff with your team? Are my account execs going to partner with your account exec? Like, how does that work? What can I tell my team? Like, you should be excited. You're going to be exposed to really smart people, that can sell anything, or whatever that dialogue might be. Actually, me using a sales example is really bad because I struggle with salespeople in general. And that's publicly disclosed. Like, that's the hardest part for me. It's like, oh God, it's just not, it's too soft stuff for me. But I think the execs that ask those kind of questions are the ones like, this deal is going to work because they're really invested not only in what the payout is, but how is it going to work? Like, how is the company going to succeed as part of the bigger company?
Yeah. I really like that. How much time do you have a hard stop an hour?
I don't.
Awesome. I got a lot of this interview. We haven't even touched anything. We've been completely going off of the interview. I like the comment from Todd. So I guess Todd Manley.
Yes.
I've been recommended like 3 times to interview Todd, so he's going to get a follow up right after this interview.
But just take him on a bike ride. He'll interview him on a bike ride.
I
All right,
cycle.
Todd.
I'm up to 40 miles, but that's my limit. So I don't know the power cyclists that do the
Have you
century.
met Todd?
I haven't met Todd. Nope, I have not met him in person, only virtually. Wait, maybe we did meet. I know he's tall.
Yeah, so you would remember.
Yeah.
He and I would meet and we'd sit across from each other, and his knees would be about at my shoulders. So it was always an interesting conversation. All right, Todd.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. I'm due for a trip out west. But so on the part I want to jump over to was integration success. As an integration leader, how do you measure success in integration?
Well, the easy answer is, so if you think about the process early on, it should be written in really wet, really dry concrete. Is you have strategic rationale, you have deal value drivers, then you have success metrics that are driven off the deal value drivers. So that's pretty straightforward. That's just 101 kind of stuff. Making the assumption that the integration team is tasked to drive to the success metrics and measure the success metrics, and ensuring that the metrics are measurable. Because one of the things that really bothers me is when you sit in these meetings, like, well, are you red, yellow, or green? It's like, well, we're green. It's like, okay, based on what? Well, things have been going really well and people smile in the meetings and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, No, what metric are you using to measure against? What is the number? So it has to be quantitative, not qualitative. But it's really hard to do that because people, I'm sure a lot of people, in this, they're like sitting in these meetings and people are like, well, we're green today or we're red, but we're going to get to green really well. And here, I'm sure this has never happened to anybody. How are you going to get to green from yellow or red? Well, we moved the date out. No, that's not how that works. You're just red into perpetuity. You don't get to just change the date so that you can hit the new date or the second new date and then call yourself green. That's not how that works. But I've been in meetings where that's actually happened, and I'm just like sitting there going, "How did you get hired? Like that's ridiculous." But so back to the question. I digress as usual. I think it's really understanding what the success metrics are and being able to drive to them based on the integration plan, assuming the strategy stays consistent. We had a thing at Microsoft where we would, sometimes the strategy will change post-close for different reasons. Like I was at Microsoft in 2008 and the economy was, in the tank then. And businesses were struggling everywhere. And it was really hard to measure success because people were missing their numbers. There was, rifts going on. People were losing their jobs, and we're sitting there talking about success on the last M&A deal. And it's like, well, we didn't fire as many people as we thought we had to. It's like, no, that's not a metric. So there's things that can influence the strategy post close, but we took a hard line. That says if the strategy changes post close, materially changes, the deal is red out of the gate, because the initial validation and reason that you went to the board to ask permissions to spend a bunch of money is fundamentally changed. So this is a new deal, basically. Like not that we had the power to do this, we would jokingly threaten, like, you're going to have to go back to the board and get approval again then. Well, we already closed the deal. This is a new deal. You need to go get approval. What? But if you think about the way the process works, it is a new deal. It's effectively a new deal. It's a new project at a minimum.
Right.
So, I think success is it's nuanced on a good day. I think, I think there are principles that you have to run to as an integration team. Like, do you commit to running full integration or the definition of fully integrated to a specific time frame, 9 to 12 months, not over 12 months? Are you, as the integration team, as responsible for the sales team hitting the revenue numbers as the sales team is? Like this guy that I referenced earlier from Sandy Blythe, great M&A integration guy who's been able to retire, but he was very adamant about, if the deal model's red, we're red as an integration team. It doesn't matter. It means we haven't done our job. Like, he was really dogmatic about that. And the rest of us were like, that's kind of harsh because there's so many things not under our control. He goes, yeah, but we're accountable. We're part of that team. You're either part of the team or you're not. And I took a lot of learning out of that. I wasn't quite as black and white as he was. But again, if you sit there and go, we should be able to have a meeting with the sales exec, both acquired and business, the parent, say, here are the numbers. It's like an ops review, right? An operational review, but it's more integration or acquired business focused, and have that discussion. Like, well, why are we missing our numbers? Well, there's a conflict in this territory between the two account managers or whatever. It's like, but that's kind of integration related. Like, okay, well, we need to figure out, how do we solve for that? And the easy answer is, like, every sales exec, well, just triple comp everybody and then everybody's happy. It's like, okay, but that kind of destroys your cost model. But again, back to the P&L thing. Like, when you have that discussion, it's like, dude, okay, so you hit your top line number and you absolutely decrement everything in the cost line. You just destroy it. But the revenue is good. It's like, no business in the world should run like that. So we need to have a different discussion. And it wasn't the guy that wanted to report to Steve Ballmer, by the way. So I think there's principles that indicate success that you drive on every deal. There are constants. And then there are the deal value drivers and the success metrics. Like, if you achieve those, say you use 90% or better achievement against target a metric as green, which is probably not, well, it's actually what I use a lot because, it gives some flexibility versus it's 100% or better. It's like, I haven't hit one of my race times in the last 10 years, but it doesn't mean I'm a horrible runner. It just means I'm just very aggressive in my goal. So that's how I measure success.
So we got listeners that are new to integration. They're learning. Do you have examples of success metrics, principles, deal value drivers?
Yeah. The deal value drivers are usually, like, you could even put them in an Excel spreadsheet and use, because they're rinse and repeat on many deals. Revenue is one, employee attrition is one, key employee versus employee base. You should have targets for that. Product milestone releases. The whole employee health kind of thing, every company does it differently, whether they do a survey, and M&A, do you do a survey pre-close and then measure against, 60, 90, 120, 180 days later, how's the employee health? I think so that's kind of blocking and tackling in terms of what the value drivers are. The deal success metrics are then, revenue is an easy one. Did you hit your first quarter number, your second quarter number? It's kind of basic math. But the important part of that is when you have success metrics, I think there's an opportunity to create, what investor relations uses this a lot, M&A, management discussion and analysis. It's sort of their place to kind of round the rough corners that maybe didn't look so good. It's basically their opportunity to write their excuses, but you don't call them excuses. It's more elegant. It's M&A. It's where they can whine and whimper about why they didn't, I wasn't able to invest in the headcount. We had trouble hiring certain key roles or whatever it might be. So revenue is kind of easy. And the M&A section, though, because most acquired businesses come out of the gate a little slow in terms of hitting their numbers. One, they usually don't have input into what those numbers are. And then when you show them the numbers, they're like, you got to be kidding me. Like, who came up with these numbers? And then back to the other comment, Kison was like, well, it supports the valuation. It's like, thank you for the valuation, but these are like real numbers. I love watching that conversation. I don't like being too close to it because it gets close to fist fights sometimes. But the M&A would be then like, okay, we're going to be slow in the first half, and here's how we're going to make it up in the second half, so we'll be whole for the year. Like, that's a really mature response by an acquired exec, especially on the sales side. It says, look, here's what happened. Like, everybody was sort of trying to figure things out for 30 or 60 days. They really weren't focused on the business. They just got acquired. They're trying to figure out, what their benefits are and where the bathroom is, and do they like the coffee at the parent, and blah, blah, blah. But we're getting, okay, now we got some traction. Now we kind of understand how you guys work. We're working better with the territory folks or the geo folks or the regional folks. Yeah, and here's how we're going to make it up in the second half. So we're all good. Like, that's a really rational, reasonable discussion to have. It doesn't happen all the time, but because people get defensive and whine and whimper and do their thing.
Any other success metrics extending off of that, or?
Pardon?
Any other success metrics?
Oh,
that?
Yeah. So, well, the other one on the employee side is, attrition is really important. I mean, doing deals in the pandemic, like, that's a very different discussion because everybody's moving everywhere, right? Everybody's hiring everybody from everybody. But if you sort of remove that lens or that filter of the pandemic and what's going on in attrition right now, key employees, right? So who are that? Usually it's no more than 5%, 10%. Well, 5% of the employee population would be, at least in my opinion, working with really great HR people are the key employees. So if you acquire a company of 100 people, 5 of them are your real keys. And, it might or might not be the CEO and the president, but it's usually the CTO, yes, no, senior engineering or sales talent. Like, what are you doing to retain those people? And for how long do you retain them? Right. So most of the retention packages are 2 or 3 years. So you want to look at retaining them short term, but then what are you going to do to re-retain them when they hit that cliff and they're like, I got everything, I'm gone, peace out. That happens a lot, right? And that's
Good point.
hard. It's you got because not always, but the thing is, it's not always about throwing money at them. It's about giving them the opportunity. Like, what opportunity are you going to get working in our company? Here's what you're going to get that you can leverage going forward. I'm okay if you leave in 5 years. I'm not just going to throw money at you, but I'm going to give you some great work experience and opportunities that you didn't have in your prior company. But then, so key employees retention, and that honestly, that should be 100%. Maybe you lose one person or 1 percentage point of the keys, but then the employee base in general, right? You should be able to retain 85, as long as that's what, again, the model dictates. Because sometimes you want them to self-attrit. That sounds kind of harsh, but sometimes you just like, we're okay if the acquired business attrits down to this level. Because by then the knowledge transfers happen. We're able to do things that we need to do, in some cases, the way they did it. It helps, again, drive the top line number and the OpEx numbers. But I think that's another example. Product milestones is another one. And again, if your key engineer lead, so this is where it does create sort of this matrixed view. If your let's say your CTO is a key and you've got two key developers, an architect and a developer, they're just absolutely core to the technology, and you've identified them early on, and you've thrown a bunch of stock at them, you've thrown a bunch of money at them, hire on bonus. If they leave and one of the key deliverables is a certain product release, which then drives an uptick in revenue after the release, but if those 1, 2, 3 of those people leave, you're going to miss that product deliverable as well. So you have to look at how the math works. Those two events are inextricably tied. You can say it was an attrition issue, or you can say it's a product issue, but the answer is yes, it's both.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. So we got revenues, attrition, key people, product roadmap, milestones.
Yeah, I mean, those would be consistent across almost every deal, unless it's just purely an acqui-hire kind of deal where you're just throwing a bunch of money, bringing 10 people over.
What about integration principles when you mentioned that?
So the integration principles are: one, trusted advisor. Team, especially the integration lead, has to be a trusted advisor on both sides of the equation, both target and parent. Otherwise, you have too many inbounds. They can come in from too many directions, and it just it kind of eviscerates the team, right? Because you just got all these inbounds. Because my experience, maybe not a universal experience, but when things go south on a deal, it's usually the integration lead that gets shot. It's sort of like the CFO in many companies when you miss the business results. Like, just go back and look at the Wall Street Journal. Company X missed their number. CFO is left for personal reasons. And the integration lead always gets blamed for everything. So the next one would be integrity. One of the key principles in integration is driving integrity. Like, again, because people are going to want to cut corners. They don't want to hear the truth. And it's kind of back to that Jack Nicholson movie. You're not ready to hear the truth, or whatever his line was. And that it's kind of that same thing. You can't handle the truth. I think that's what it was. And that's, again, it takes a little time, but I tell my team, like, don't be afraid to ever, as long as you have your facts straight. Timing is everything, but as long as you have your facts and the timing is right, you need to tell people what the facts are. And you can say truth, but truth can be described or defined a bunch of different ways. My truth could be different than your truth, kind of thing. So, there's that. So that's why I said stick to the facts. The facts are indisputable. Truth can be funged, so to speak. So integrity is another big one. Trusted advisor. The other thing is, I think one of the other key principles is to stick to the plan, except when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is our plan. This is just what we got to do. I'm like, yeah, but what if it's leading you down a dark alley? Like that doesn't work. So, I use the term intelligently flexible. And I've used it since I was at Sun, actually. The guy that hired me into the cost accounting job that was his word. He goes, "You need to be intelligently flexible." I'm like, "It's cost accounting. There's X and a cost. Like you just do the math." He goes, "Not always, right? There's over, under, spend, all that procurement stuff that I forgot a long time ago. There's cost overhead. There's all kinds of manufacturing throughput. Ooh, maybe I remember more of this than I thought. Um, but having that ability to be intelligently flexible, I think, is another key principle. Like you got to kind of know, you're not just blindly following a plan. Like you listen, you pay attention in the meetings, you listen for when things are about to go sideways and try to anticipate, well, how do I course correct in advance of that happening? Do I really need to spend this next quarter's contractor dollars on this? Everything else is slipping around it. Why would I spend that? Right. Well, because it's in the plan. It's like, well, then your plan's wrong. It's sort of like, again, back to finance, FP&A. FP&A people do corporate annual budgets, which are completely irrelevant the day after the start of the new fiscal year, because they were developed 3 months before the fiscal year started. And then they do actuals to budget. And then you build a forecast based on the actuals. And then you analyze actuals to forecast to budget. And it's that same sort of mindset where you're looking at, like, what do I spend and when do I spend it? And is this the right time to spend it? Or do I reforecast, i.e. for integration, be replan, because most costs should be directly related to a line item in the work plan, the integration plan. So if the work changes, the dollars change. It's not about the dollars changing and the work changes, unless you're just told, stop spending, we're putting everything on pause. That's a different discussion. That's not an M&A thing. That's at the enterprise level, there's another challenge going on that needs to be addressed.
Wow. I like your principles. I like you having them so clearly defined.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it makes sense. It's just like having a company, you got core values. Why not have integration principles? Because we're about to go through the largest magnitude of change management your organization's ever dealt with.
Well, and I think the thing about, at least for me, I sort of say this tongue in cheek, but I don't really. Like I learned a long time ago, I am never going to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. That's a huge responsibility. So I try to keep things really, really simple with the understand. I know from experience, if you don't start out simple, you're screwed. Just black and white. If you don't start out simple, because things self-complicate, they just complicate. They have to. So if you start complicated, then I don't know what the nth derivative of complication is, 12 spheres removed or whatever the math would be. You'll never get there. You don't have to have a bunch of PhDs in the room then, and they don't exist. So, so that's why, for me, the principles are really about, it's about the other principle, keep it simple as long as possible.
Yeah.
It is going to complicate by definition.
So I definitely got to do my signature close question, but I'm at this awkward point where I've never had an interview. I've only gotten halfway through the topics that we're supposed to cover. The second thought I had is you're incredibly good at podcasting. I mean, you come on very natural. You got great stories you incorporate. So I'd be pleasured to and honored to have the second half of this interview at some point.
I'd love to. I'm having fun. I'd love, the thing is, Kison, it's easy to talk about things that you're passionate about. And maybe I'm a complete whack job, but I'm really passionate about M&A. It's who I am. And,
so somebody asked me the other day, how come I don't do the panels and stuff? And I was like, I hate panels because when you go to them at conferences, they're these short little monologues that are pretty well scripted. And then it is just a little series of monologue responses to questions, and they sound really canned. But
exactly.
Listening to you, I get this idea. It'd be fun to have someone like you, a couple others, somebody like Todd, to have a debate. Like let's debate some shit and really have a robust conversation that challenges some different views on things. Todd's in, so perfect.
As long as Todd and I don't have to play one-on-one, I'm in.
Yeah, no, we'll get some. I think we get a couple. You need 3 to 4, but something debatable that would make it interesting, because that's the thing. I've said, and I'm burnt out. Even when we do our own events, we rarely do a panel. Rarely, and that's the thing. They're so boring. It's just I'd rather spend an hour with you and get into this level of depth and get all these cool stories. Our marketing team has a heyday with these interviews because we can write all kinds of blog posts. We'll mess around and write an ebook and quote you a few times. And here's the principles we learned from Jim Buckley. So I don't know. So definitely we got to do both. We'll keep you busy.
One, I'm happy to do another second half of this one. And I think the panel idea would be great because I do, I'm like you at the conferences, and I've spoken at conferences, and I just itch to have the dialogue. I don't want to stand in front of a bunch of people and spew my truth to them. Like, this is meaningless and it sounds overly scripted and blah, blah, blah. Because I hate canned responses, because then it's kind of like the checklist thing. Like, if you're following a checklist, it's monkeys.
But that's the second half of the interview. Yeah. That's the second half of the interview is we're going to talk about checklists.
Yeah,
we didn't
exactly.
even get to the meat of what this interview is supposed to be. So that's a good plug. That's like the TikTok video.
Yeah,
like,
there you go. So
if you want to see the rest of this interview, you're going to have to pick up the next one and listen to it.
We'll just riff right off of that, right into the second one. Let's do that.
Perfect. So we got that, and then let's pick up the thing about the debate. I'll bug Todd and a few others. I don't know. We should just try it for fun.
Yeah, no, and Todd and I know each other, so that makes it real easy. And and there's other people, if offline, if you want to.
We should have some nice debates between corp dev integration folks. I wanted debates, like just not this typical thing that we get bored to death at conferences. I got to get to the last question before we sign off and close. What's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Well, this can only go. There's only so much I can tell about this one without probably crossing some either moral or ethical or legal.
I can turn off the live stream and maybe
no, but we did a deal. I won't name the company, either company. We did a deal in London. No, we did a deal in the Nordic. I'll just say the Nordics, and we did the employee announce. So we bunch of us stood up from both companies and said, we're telling all of you, we've sold ourselves to these guys, and they're here to tell you what a great journey it's going to be and why it's such a great thing. And I had my beard, and it was like I've only worn Levi's or denim and then like maybe a flannel shirt or a shirt like this to work for a long time. I don't even know if I could find my suit. Quite honestly, I have one suit that does weddings, funerals, big events. So I wore a suit to this. I had a white starched collar shirt, very dark suit, and I'm standing next to the CEO, and we're talking to the employees, and the HR person, my HR person, was telling the employees some things about benefits. And without even looking, this guy leans over to me. He says, "You know what? You look like a hitman." And I listened. I kept looking at the employees while she was talking and delivering the benefit stuff. And I said, "I am. You should be in fear for your career." And I was trying to make him laugh. But afterwards, he was like, "Okay, so were you serious about that? Like, do I not have a job going forward?" Like, this was the CEO of a, not a big company, but not it was a couple hundred employees and, 50 million in revenue kind of thing. And I was like, dude, I was just kidding. You started it. You said I look like a hitman. So, so it was pretty funny. It was last time I wore the suit, actually.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, if we can't have fun doing what we do, then we shouldn't do it.
I like that philosophy, principle.
Yeah, I mean, I love what I do. It took me a long time to get to it, but I guess never say never.
This has been a blast. Thank you so much. Thank you for the extra time.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, and I'd be happy to whatever follow-on you're up for. I'm up for it.
Yeah, I'll I don't know if you want to see this or how it turns out first, but otherwise we'll get into it for sure. We'll follow up.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Jim, thanks so much for your time today, and here's to the deal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here, I got the live feed off. I think it's just a few people on their Zoom one here. That was really good.
Well, thank you. I was, the thing is, what I've learned over time is, one, I don't do a lot of this. what I've learned just with work, I am exactly the same at work as I am at home.
I
I
think it's storytelling classes just to improve my presentation abilities, and you're really good at it. Like you tell this story in such a nice short time frame, and you get through it, and it's cool. That's what makes interviewing really engaging.
thanks. Yeah, no, my wife would say I drone on, but maybe that's the difference at home.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I
it's
don't
maybe it's that Irish, some huge percentage Irish, like that storytelling capability. It's like it's really how it drives a lot of what I do, how I do at work. Like I get people to do what they do by storytelling. A lot of analogies, some maybe
yeah.
what people don't
It
get.
makes it so much easier to listen to you. We learned a lot. Like I'm excited to work with the marketing team on, hey, let's pull some stuff out of this. That's what we do really well is repurpose the content. So no, I'm excited for it. It's good.
Well,
Um,
I'm glad I actually said something that maybe was new to people because it's so many. Like I think I don't think what I do is all that different than a lot of. I think my experiences are different. And that's what I try to portray. But at the end of the day, a lot of M&A is kind of blocking and tackling. But it's the 80-20 rule. I really focus on like I want the 20% to be different, not the 80%.
damn, Todd's still with us. I thought he would have bailed out by now.
You should be
I
going on a bike ride. I haven't seen your Strava lately, Todd. You need to get on it, man.
I you know I the point about the experience and what you learn from it. Our next summit, and I was actually he's still on there. I was
Now 22 pounds. Wow.
Yeah, we're doing about modern practices in M&A. But you got such truth to there's so much you learn from experience, and that's where I think that's the things that the mistakes are from that, right? It's just so much that you naturally learn. I don't know if that's like a component you build into this theme of modern M&A. Now I got the tech companies that want to come in, buzz about the latest VMware. You guys have a product to do a integration platform as a service,
Yep.
isn't? So there's that. There's Zscaler. Ironically, interviewed their head of corp dev recently, and they got a similar model. I think different. And then there's Dell Boomi, which I think you guys
Yep.
have a relationship with because
Yep.
I was at a Dell conference for VMware. So
Yeah, no, we're actually Boomi is one of the topics in our spin out. It's a small world. Yeah, and I
oh,
think I think the other thing is again, I remember there, and maybe I could bring this up next time, but there was one time at Microsoft where I was because Microsoft like we would show up at 10-person, 20-person companies with like 50 people. It was abusive. And I remember going into the head of corp dev and my boss at the time, Mark Wolfram, and suggesting, I said, give me a deal and let me run it the way I want to run it with no interference from any of you guys. And I can do it with 10 people and I can do all the due diligence with 2 pages of questions. And I will deliver exactly or better the experience that we do with all these other people and the 800 question due diligence list. And they were intrigued, but they were like, yeah, but what if it goes sideways? I'm like, what if I get hit by a car in the parking lot? And like, so what? Like, worst thing that could happen. Because I think there's a way, I think there's a concept that people have to be brave enough to experience or let happen. And that is a lean M&A integration approach. He's like, you just don't need an integration lead and 7 project managers, and then an HR lead with 4 project managers, and an R&D lead with 7. And pretty soon you can't fit in the target company's conference room. You're like, I don't need all these people. I need 10 of the right people. That's all I need, and I can find those 10 right people.
yeah,
There's only 3 of them in this room right now.
lean M&A integration. That's like a modern philosophy or concept.
Yeah, no, I think it kind of goes back to the material you sent around agile. Right? It's really
Yeah. You read it?
Yep. Yeah,
Oh
like
wow. I want the criticism. Where'd I go wrong with it?
I made notes. Maybe we can do it offline or whatever, but
Again, or we'll do it as another interview. You just riffed on me about this is what you got wrong, and that would be fun. Again, debate.
From a guy that hates writing, right? So this is the guy that hates writing. 1, it's too long. 3, it's too long, and this didn't make any sense. So, any questions?
I like the too long one because the second book was like a 20-minute read.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm
Yeah,
like, tell me that's too long.
that's why I have to leverage comms people a lot because the CFO when I started at Microsoft, Chris Liddell, he was from International Paper. And did I tell you this last time? He was the New Zealand guy, and he was the head of the rugby union, the New Zealand rugby union. So not a small thing, but he was this big, global CFO. Great guy. But I remember the first time we met with him because our team reported up into the CFO org along with Corp Dev through parallel management chains. And he said, "Okay, guys, here's how I like to see M&A stuff. So I want to see your slides. I want to see. I want to get a. I want to understand your thinking around the deal, both why to do the deal and how to integrate the deal." He goes, "But here are the requirements: no more than 5 slides, no more than 5 bullets per slide, no more than 5 words per slide." And I'm like thinking, like, "Oh my god, I found the guy I really want to work with." That's like my nirvana. Like, I hate, I just long drone on kind of emails, and like that's how I write my emails. They're like,
I got this idea for an app I want to build. And those, have you followed any of this GPT-3 sort of?
no, no.
It's like NLP AI, but it's just sort of works, like actually works. And people are building it. So if you get a chance, search GPT-3 examples, and there's like hundreds of these little apps. It does some cool shit. Like you put in your website and it'll write sales emails for you, like probably better than half your sales team.
Guaranteed.
So that's what's like actually making it, because I think the training data they used was like all of Wikipedia, plus whatever other resources. And it writes that way. It's got just a good grammar. Well, my idea was the other summarizing. So people are building summarization technology around it, but to actually be able to use this in the data room to just summarize documents and just be able to say, hey, I can enable you, Jim, to just breeze through some of these documents, like taking the 100-page and just boom, boom, boom. Here's key things.
There's a company in India. Oh God, it begins with a Q. Qualtrics. What they do, and VMware used to use them, but we don't anymore. And they used them when I was at VMware the first time, and they would send a lot of the legal due diligence documents to this team, and it was really to look at legal agreements, commercial agreements, and they would search for the keywords you wanted them to search for. So then you got one table view that was consistent across every document and or agreement. But they did it manually. It was just, so you said look for revenue. So I pulled out all the revenue references. You look for,
this would be similar. You would be able to pull summaries across all. I never thought about that. You would be able to pull summaries across all the documents in the whole data room and pull that out.
Yeah. And then you just say, this is what I want end state. This is what I want the output to look like. It's going to be this
if you
column,
give
20 rows.
Simple interface for the end user to create those parameters and just saying, okay, like, let me have some control over this,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a direction. All this technology, everybody's focusing on these odd areas in M&A, but I think this stuff it's not about making technology anymore. It's all application. So can we borrow something that you guys are using over here in sales and just plug it in M&A?
Put it on their iPhone or their tablet, their iPad, and make it an app, and get $1 per download, and you get to retire.
Well, I like the principle about simple. Like, can you simplify things? Can it help you simplify things? Otherwise, we're just complicating the to-do list, and it just doesn't. It's not going to help me get it done.
The value add at some point is just there's no return. There's zero value add. In fact, it's diluted because it takes attention away from what's really important. And that's what I just want. What are the 3 to 5 things I need to know? That's all I want. Well, yeah, but it's really 10 to 15. It's like, no, you didn't hear what I just want 3 to 5. You can build a list of 15, but I just stack rank them, priority order. I just want the top 3. Just give me the top 3. That's 80% of what I'm looking for. If you're more comfortable making a list of 15, knock yourself out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the second interview.
It'll be fun. This is great. I really enjoyed it. This is, I gotta say, my Thursdays, this has been fun.
I'm going to come out to Cal. You're in California, right?
No, actually, we're up in Tahoe.
Oh, you're in Tahoe. Okay.
I mean, I go down to once things sort of open up again, as they shut down.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking about going out, and I don't know. I pinged a handful of people. I'm like, yeah, I'll meet up with you. Come out. I was like, all right.
I would come
So,
down. Yeah, I mean, if it's yeah, I mean it's 3.5 hours from here. So
well, no, if you're going out there, let me know ahead.
okay, yeah,
Because I mean, I'm flexible now. My thing was the next 4 to 6 weeks. Within that, I'd like to get out there. We're about to close a deal with Flex, so if I can get that done, um, I want to spend some time over there and just
nice,
take care of my customers. Just
awesome. Yeah, you should. Novel idea.
yeah. Actually, I should look at my LinkedIn. There's at least half a dozen people I know at VMware. I can just camp out in the headquarters over there for
Yeah,
the day.
yeah. Assuming they're there, because VMware has been very generous. Like I
Uh,
was able to move, and they were like, you know what, most of M&A you can do this way anyways, right? So we
the old days are all stuck behind. The
yeah,
best you can do is maybe get everybody out somewhere. I don't know if people are doing that. That's a good question. A lot of folks I talk to, it's just coffee meetings. Like anything you got to dress up for, nobody's doing. But if I can show up my shorts, I'll do it.
exactly. No, and it goes back to that simple, right? There's no pretense. It's like, just go chat. Let's just go have some rigorous, honest conversation. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
even going to take notes.
keep me posted. I'll get a follow up on this interview, and then I'm gonna ping Todd because I think he was on our list of one of the speakers for the next summit. Maybe we do the debate thing and try it out the next summit. I don't know.
Todd's great. Todd had changed jobs, and I sort of started not mentoring him, but kind of sort of. He was always reaching out, like, "What do you think? What do you think? What should I do?" And he's just one. He's a great guy. We lived pretty close to each other in the Bay Area, and I would run, and he'd comment, and he would bike, and I would comment,
That's
um,
awesome.
and yeah. So I mean, there's more people like that in the Bay Area. So I think there's a lot of
Who else should I be interviewing? Who'd be another awesome person?
it's what I would think. So there's individuals, but then there's companies, because certain companies, like Cisco, is pretty well known for their M&A, but
Yeah, we
I
had
don't
Karen
think
Ashley on the last summit.
who.
Karen Ashley, she heads their integration.
Yeah, and so, but there's also a woman that leads their go-to-market integration that is very personable. I'd have to look
Oh,
her name up.
yeah. I know we're talking to somebody to go to market, but I'm not sure if I've done the prep with them yet. I think they're in our list somewhere.
So Cisco is a deal machine, but they were also, at least when I was at Microsoft, it was kind of funny. We would like kind of compete with them, like who did more deals and who did bigger deals and that stuff. And it was kind of that who compete higher on the wall kind of thing. Um,
Uh,
Graham Wood, did you ever meet Graham Wood?
no.
He was their
No.
head of integration, but he moved on a long time ago. But he Mark Wolfram, my boss at the time, and Graham would always sort of be competitive about that stuff. But this is my experience, my opinion. I'll say this broadly, but like Cisco's really good about marketing their M&A and how many deals they've done. But when you
Yeah.
really kind of, if you know what to look for, they don't really integrate their companies. And some of them they've just absolutely left alone. But they'll talk about M&A and include integration. And you're like, all right, well, it's your business, your practice. So however you want to define it, because it's sort of like, how do you define fully integrated? There's a million different derivatives of that. But we say, you guys don't integrate your companies, you just acquire them and then leave them alone. That's a bunch of no, we do, like we do this and that. And it's like, all right, yeah, that's like we sort of poke fun at them sometimes. But there's no denying they're an M&A machine.
Yeah, I'll send you the interview with Karen. It was interesting. Because they've gone through
Yeah.
like all this change in the last couple of years. It'd be worth a listen to.
No, absolutely. That'd be great.
Well, I better hop off and
All right.
continue on here, but we'll get a follow up going, and I appreciate it. Thanks again so much. I'm looking forward to working the team on this.
Oh, that'd be great. I look forward to seeing what the output is and see if I actually sound like it makes sense.
We get great editors on top of it, so even if you didn't,
Perfect world.
change.
Perfect
Yeah.
world. All
Thanks a
right.
lot, Jim. Take
Thanks,
care.
Alan.